You're standing at the edge of a decision that most people never think about until it's too late. The body of someone you love lies before you, and suddenly you're asked, cremation or burial? It feels like a practical choice: cost, space, tradition. But what if I told you that what happens to your body after death could determine your soul's journey for eternity? Natalia Bekhtereva, one of the world's leading neurophysiologists, spent her final years uncovering what happens to consciousness after death, and what she found might change everything you thought you knew about saying goodbye. Today, I'm breaking down the hidden science and spiritual wisdom behind the choice between cremation and burial. This isn't just about rituals or traditions. It's about understanding what happens to consciousness when the heart stops beating. One specific ritual detail that most modern funeral homes ignore could be trapping souls between worlds for centuries. And the worst part? We're making these mistakes without even knowing it. Before we dive in, let me tell you about Natalia Bekhtereva. She wasn't some New Age guru or spiritual teacher. She was a hardcore scientist, a neurophysiologist who spent decades studying the human brain. She considered herself an agnostic, someone who believed only in what could be measured and proven, until something happened that science couldn't explain. By the end of this video, you'll understand the critical timeline of the soul's journey after death, and how to ensure peace for yourself and your loved ones, whether you believe in an afterlife or not. This information might be the most important thing you ever learn about death. 1. The scientist who saw beyond death. How does a world-renowned brain scientist suddenly start believing in the afterlife? For Natalia, it wasn't a religious conversion or a near-death experience. It was something far more unsettling. After the death of a close friend, she attended the funeral where an ancient tradition was broken. The body was cremated within just 2 days. What happened next shook her scientific worldview to its core. For the following week, Natalia experienced something she couldn't explain. She felt as though someone was trying to speak to her, a presence around her that words couldn't describe. She couldn't sleep. Her brain worked at full capacity even during rest, processing signals that seemed to come from somewhere beyond our world. This wasn't just grief or imagination. This was a scientist experiencing something that defied her understanding of reality. Later, when she began reading ancient texts and speaking with spiritual leaders from different traditions, lamas, Orthodox elders, shamans, she realized that the rapid cremation might have interrupted the natural process of the soul separating from the body. What makes Natalia's perspective so valuable is that she approached these questions with both scientific rigor and spiritual openness. She didn't abandon her training. She expanded it. She began to see death not as an endpoint, but as a transition that follows specific patterns. And these patterns matter for everyone, regardless of what you believe happens after we die. Because if Natalia was right, the way we handle death today might be causing unnecessary suffering. Not just for the living, but for those who have passed on. But what exactly did she discover about those crucial first hours after death? 2. The first 72 hours. The soul's initial journey. What if I told you that for 3 days after death, your soul might still believe it's alive? This sounds like fantasy, but across vastly different cultures and spiritual traditions, we find the same understanding. The first 72 hours after death are critical. In Tibetan and Vedic traditions, it's believed that for these first 3 days, the soul still resides in the body. But Natalia wasn't interested in blind faith. She wanted to understand why this belief was so universal. From a neurophysiological perspective, she noted that brain activity doesn't simply switch off at the moment of clinical death. There's a gradual shutdown, a process rather than an event. What we call death is actually a complex transition where different systems power down at different rates. During these first 72 hours, according to spiritual traditions and Natalia's observations, the soul is in a state of shock and confusion. It doesn't yet understand that it has died. It tries to communicate, to move, to understand what's happening. But no one can hear it anymore. Now imagine what happens if the body is burned during this time. If the body is subjected to fire during this period, the soul may experience intense disorientation and panic. Its journey toward reincarnation or ascension may be disrupted. It may remain attached to the place of death or to living people, unaware that it has passed away. You might be thinking, but isn't cremation an ancient practice in many cultures? You're absolutely right. In Hinduism, Buddhism, and other traditions, cremation is common. But here's the crucial difference. In those traditions, there is a strict ritual preparation. The soul is guided, calmed, and its separation is accompanied by mantras, prayers, and spiritual guides. Modern cremation rituals, especially in urban morgues, lack this sacredness. The body is often placed in a plastic bag and sent to the furnace the same day without prayers or proper farewells. This isn't a ritual, it's destruction. As Natalia once said, "I see bodies turning to ash, but I also sense that consciousness may still reside inside them, even if only residual." And that is horrifying. But the journey doesn't end after 3 days. In fact, it's just beginning. 9 days between worlds. By the 9th day after death, the soul faces its first major trial. And what we do during this time can either help or trap it forever. Death, contrary to popular belief, is not an instantaneous event. It's a process in which the body, soul, and consciousness slowly and sometimes painfully sever their ancient connections. Within this transition, the first 9 days play a special role. Natalia, who dedicated her life to studying the brain, was amazed by how much activity continues after the heart stops beating. According to her, the human brain possesses what she called inertia of consciousness, capable of retaining remnants of personality and sensation even after clinical death. But it's not just about the brain. Spiritual practitioners observe that during the first 9 days, the soul literally wanders between the earthly world and the other side, unsure where to go. It returns to beloved places, hears voices, and feels the grief of the living. It may even try to intervene in unfinished matters from its lifetime. From the 3rd to the 9th day, the soul begins to ascend spiritually, according to Orthodox elders. It visits familiar places, observes its loved ones, and sees whether they mourn for it, pray for it, or remember it. This is the crucial moment. The soul either moves forward, accepting its new state, or stays behind, getting stuck. If it feels unacknowledged, if it doesn't hear words of forgiveness or feel love, it may become one of those restless spirits unable to leave the earth. Natalia said, "I cannot prove this scientifically, but I feel that consciousness is not merely a product of the brain. It is something more. And it does not vanish after death. It waits." Across different eras, the 9th day after death was marked by special rituals. People gathered in silence, lit candles, placed the deceased's favorite items on the table, recited prayers, and above all, thought of them. Directed memories, sincerely shared without hysteria or fear, serve as a guide for the soul, a bridge between worlds. That's why Natalia opposed the dehumanization of death in modern society. Funerals have become mechanical. Call a service, order wreaths, play music, and forget. But the soul does not forget. If it is not properly honored, it may not leave. It may suffer for centuries, wandering through others' dreams, lingering in corners of rooms that no longer belong to it. But there's one final threshold that determines the ultimate fate of the soul, the 40th day. The final threshold. Why do so many diverse cultures, from Orthodox Christianity to Buddhism, mark the 40th day as the point of no return? Among all dates associated with death, the 40th day holds a unique, almost mystical significance. It acts as an invisible threshold, the final bridge beyond which the soul can no longer return. In the traditions of Orthodoxy, Buddhism, Islam, and even among the ancient Egyptians, 40 days were considered necessary for purification, forgiveness, repentance, and transition. Natalia, researching memory, thought, and consciousness structure, often wondered why such diverse cultures intuitively arrived at the same number. 40. From a neuroscience perspective, 40 days is the time required for a person to either adapt to a new reality or completely lose connection with the old one. Natalia believed this might apply to the soul as well. During these days, consciousness freed from the body searches for its new self. It observes, analyzes, lets go, or suffers if it cannot let go. In interviews, Natalia noted that people grieving a loss often feel particularly strong pain on the 40th day. This is no coincidence. The psyche of the living intuitively reacts to the moment when the soul of the loved one leaves forever. We cannot explain it, but we feel it in dreams, in our bodies, in thoughts that come suddenly. In one of her notebooks found after her death, Natalia recorded a case where a patient, 39 days after his father's death, told a doctor, "Now I feel he is no longer near," as if until now he was waiting for something, and now there is silence. Many traditions claim the 40-day period is not just a time frame, it is a trial. During this time, the soul goes through encounters with images of its actions, those it hurt, those it didn't have time to love. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it speaks of bardo, a state between death and rebirth. In bardo, the soul experiences fear, shame, joy, and pain, without a body. The 40th day is like the final exam, not for the deceased, but for the living. Everything we do on this day, praying, remembering, speaking aloud to the soul, becomes part of its path. Natalia proposed a scientific explanation for this phenomenon. Field consciousness. The theory that human memory and feelings exist not only in the brain, but also in an informational field in which everyone participates. When the body dies, the field does not disappear. It continues to live as long as someone remembers, calls the name, or speaks to it. 40 days is the time it takes for the field to begin weakening, moving away from earthly reality. If it is held by sorrow, anger, or fear, the soul may not leave. It remains at a crossroads, without peace, without a body, without a voice. Now that we understand the timeline, let's address the central question, ash or flesh. What the soul chooses. Is cremation a modern convenience or a spiritual catastrophe? The question arises more and more frequently. Cremation or traditional burial? In a modern world where cities grow upward and cemeteries cannot expand, cremation becomes a convenient, fast, practical choice. But what if behind convenience lies something deeper? What if the way we say goodbye to the body affects the soul's path? Natalia, who devoted her life to studying the brain, could not ignore this dilemma. Although she remained a scientist, her reflections often went beyond formulas and laboratories, into the space where science meets intuition. She said, "The human body is not just a vessel. It is the final shell to which the personality is attached. And how we say goodbye determines what remains in the field of memory." In her archives were notes about patients who had experienced clinical death and remembered moments when their bodies were touched by unfamiliar hands. These memories had no logical explanation. Yet the subjective experience of observing from the side was too vivid to ignore. So she asked, "What if the soul really does witness what happens to the body after death? If it sees itself being exposed, burned, poured into an urn, what does it feel at that moment? Freedom or fear? And most importantly, does it have time to understand that it has died before its last shell disappears?" In traditional religions, Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, cremation is viewed with caution, not because fire is evil, but because it accelerates a process that should unfold slowly. Death is not a switch. It is like a dying fire. It must be extinguished carefully, respectfully, leaving space for the final glow. In one interview, Natalia admitted that personally, she preferred burial. She believed the body should settle down, dissolving back into the earth. She called Earth the organic memory of the planet. If the body carrying a unique neural structure returns to the soil, it continues its dialogue with nature. With cremation, everything burns quickly, instantly, leaving no time, no trace. However, she did not entirely reject cremation. Her approach was deeper. It wasn't about fire or earth. It was about how it was done. If cremation occurs in haste, without farewell, without words, without meaning, then the soul remains in emptiness. But if the person was prepared, if they were spoken to, if the ashes were kept with respect, and if the family remembered them every day, then even ashes can become light. After all, ashes are not the end of the body. They are the concentrated essence of memory, and if memory lives, the connection remains. Especially difficult is this choice for relatives. People don't know what is better. Some fear the earth, others fear fire, and each makes a decision based on pain. But Natalia advised looking not at fear, but at meaning. "Ask yourself," she said, "in what form is it easier for you to speak to the departed? What helps you feel their presence? If praying before an urn works for you, then do so. If a grave is important to you, visit it. Most importantly, don't leave memory without a home." That is the key. It is not about where the body lies, but where the memory lives. But what happens after we've made our choice? How do we maintain connection without holding the soul back? We've journeyed through the hidden landscape of what happens after death. From those first critical 72 hours, when the soul still believes it's alive, through the 9 days of wandering between worlds, to the 40th day, when the final threshold is crossed. And we've confronted the central question: cremation or burial? The answer isn't simple, because death itself isn't simple. It's not an end. It's a transition that requires our conscious participation. What Natalia discovered through her unique blend of scientific inquiry and spiritual openness was that the method matters less than the meaning we bring to it. Whether you choose cremation or burial, what matters most is the intention, respect, and love with which you approach this sacred passage. If cremation is chosen, allow time, at least 3 days, before the body is burned. Speak to the departed, explain what is happening, create a ritual of farewell that acknowledges the soul's journey. Keep the ashes with respect, not as an object, but as a symbol of transformation. If burial is chosen, approach it not as disposal, but as a return, a giving back to the earth that once gave life. Visit not out of obligation, but out of connection. Speak not from grief, but from gratitude. And regardless of your choice, honor the timeline of transition. Mark the 3rd day, the 9th day, the 40th day. Not with elaborate ceremonies, but with quiet remembrance, with words spoken aloud, with candles lit in silence. Because death is not the end of the relationship. It's a change in its form. The soul that has departed still feels our thoughts, our words, our love. And how we remember shapes not just our healing, but their journey. This understanding transforms not just how we approach death, but how we live. When we recognize that consciousness continues beyond the body, we begin to see our lives as part of something larger, a continuum of experience that doesn't end when the heart stops beating. If this perspective has changed how you think about death, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, how would you want to be remembered after you're gone? By understanding death more deeply, we learn to live more fully, with awareness of what truly matters in this brief, precious life. Not achievement or possession, but connection. Not duration, but depth. Not fear, but love. And in that understanding, we find not just peace for those who have gone before us, but meaning for ourselves, here and now, in this moment that will never come again.